Dennis, so just looking there, Mark was introducing the attacks there on the police. Why is it the police, why do they bear the brunt of all of this?
Exactly. And I speak also as an ex-MP for Rotherham for 20 years. I know that area. 1976, there was a giant march in a by-election by the National Front, the forerunner of the BNP and the EDL. 2015, people were arrested. Also, serious disturbances in Rotherham. The BNP was strong there. UKIP had councillors elected there. Now, the police, in my view, and I really am talking from a lot of experience here, do not respond with massive presence early enough on. I think Boris Johnson produced crazy ideas like water cannon. Well, that just makes things far worse. When you see 20, 30 police, a thin blue line, oh boy, that's the target. You see 200 or 300 who are going to circle round, arrest you and put you in front of a court fast. And as in 1959, this has got such a long history, Notting Hill race riots, the judges sent the perpetrators to prison for 4 years. And I hope Keir Starmer's right when he says they'll live to regret it. Frankly, I would open a prison in Rwanda and send them all there.
Wow.
It's interesting because they'll have to open a prison somewhere because he hasn't got the cells here, has it?
Well, we've got 4,000 women in prison for non-violent crimes, and we've got judges who send people into prison for, far more than any other equivalent country in Europe. We could do a lot. We're not getting into prison reform here, but I think once the first sentences are handed down and they are not weeks, they're not being bound over, they're not community service, they are spells in prison, that will send the right message.
Let's bring Mark White back into this, because, Mark, we understand that COBRA is meeting this morning. That's the emergency response being put together by the government. They'll be meeting in Downing Street. Some criticism this should have been held sooner. What difference do you think that will make? We've already had this suggestion of these 24-hour courts and, fast-tracking these cases through and imminent sentencing. But that's an issue with prisons, I presume, that will hold things up, if anything. But in terms of COBRA and getting, the police to calm things down, do you think this could be a turning point?
Well, listen, it's always possible, but, from COBRA's point of view, it's important to ensure that the resources are there, that they can plan out strategically how they keep those reserves, if they have much in the way of reserves after quite a few days of violence across the country and police forces from other areas moving in to help those forces that have been hit. The language that's coming from ministers, we're hearing from the Prime Minister, the Home Secretary again this morning, it's still this language of there will be a reckoning, a price to pay, we're going after the thugs, etc. No sort of message as such to the wider community. I mean, I've heard on other broadcasters this morning who are trying to delve down into some of the wider issues, but really they're talking about, do you think that the language that politicians have used in the past has fueled this? Well, it's not about the language that politicians are using, it's about what these communities are feeling and facing on a daily basis, how they've seen a fracturing and a disintegration of their society, how they've seen hotels in their areas just suddenly requisitioned without any say in that operation being done to house asylum seekers. So yes, there's no excuse at all for the terrible violence that we've seen on our streets in recent days, but there's a wider anger at play that makes a fertile ground for this kind of extremist fringe to come up and to stir these kind of emotions. And unless that, I think, is addressed, then going forward, I think we're looking at other issues of unrest in the future.
Thanks, Mark. Thank you very much indeed. Neil Parish is a former Conservative MP. He joins us from Somerset today. Neil, judging from your experience, there's a lot of calls about Parliament being recalled, this chaos existing, and there is a feeling that MPs should be there running the country.
Well, I think, what we must remember is that the government carries on whether Parliament's sitting or not. In some ways, it gives the Prime Minister and the Home Secretary Secretary the ability actually to be able to, call Cobra together and actually very much concentrate on what's happening with, the demonstrations and the extreme sort of thuggery and violence with it. I think none of us mind demonstrations, do we? But we cannot have this amount of destruction that's going on. But I also think, that the government will also have to come up with, good policies to actually stem the flow of asylum seekers, because I think this is sort of, it's encouraging people to demonstrate, but nobody minds demonstrations. But whatever, right-wing demonstrations, left-wing, whatever. But what you can't do, like happened in Tamworth, last night, where they hurled concrete and bricks and broke the windows, got into a hotel. Not only is it terribly violent, it is also, highly dangerous. What would happen if they got hold of people in the hotel? We do have to take this very seriously. But I think the social media side of it and and how we sort of try and stop that being, wrong information going out and hyping up the situation, that I think takes time to settle. And I think there should be a lot of work done on that. And I think as soon as Parliament comes back in September, they should be hard at work on that. But in the meantime, I think let the government get on with it. Let the police really get together, get the magistrates, sitting all night if necessary, and actually make sure these thugs are charged. That's what matters at the moment more than anything. I think Parliament coming back at this stage may also, dare I say, encourage them to think that they are winning and they're causing a huge upset.
Well, someone who disagrees with you, Neil, is Nigel Farage, leader of Reform and himself, of course, an MP, who was actually also criticised last week by some for fanning the flames of this situation. He's issued a statement this morning saying, "I've been totally appalled by the levels of violence seen in the last couple of days. The levels of intimidation and threat to life have no place in a functioning democracy." He talks about the violence against police officers specifically and the need for a deep discussion about all of the issues facing us. But his point was, at the end, we must have a more honest debate, and he thinks a recall of Parliament would be an appropriate start to this, which, interestingly enough, is your position, Dennis.
Yeah.
I think that there is a case strip, but at the same time, if we're going to go into court cases, Parliament can't discuss it, because by definition, you can't discuss anything in front of the courts. I would prefer the courts to operate very fast and start sending people to prison. We're not having this big debate. We're not having this debate also about people like Elon Musk giving £45 million a month to Donald Trump to promote right-wing racism. But Twitter now is the main mechanism for stirring all of this up.
We talked about this earlier in the programme, Dennis, and we're talking about the anonymity that goes with what you're able to post there, whatever. Do you think that you should be visible, that if you make a statement, people should know where it came from and who you are?
I've always been of the view that if you're in political life, you shouldn't hide behind anonymity. And I think social media has a responsibility. The organisers of WhatsApp, Telegram, all the different connections, and the influencers are so important. No, they don't go out and throw bricks at anybody, but when they start talking about there are too many people in here, they're not respecting the British way of life, it just creates that climate, which I saw in Rotherham 20 years ago, and 10 years ago and 15 years ago, and that is also part, I'm afraid, of the problem.
But Dennis, who is going to talk to, say, the English Defence League, and we're talking, and this right wing? I mean, they're called the far right everywhere. I never hear anybody being called the far left.
Oh, yes, you do. Come on, far left. Yeah, how many books of mine I've written against the far left you want?
All right. Well, who's going to talk to the far right? And should someone talk to the far right? Should someone say, look, let's talk. What is your problem? What can we do to sort this out?
The English Defence League, I mean, give me their phone number, give me their email. I mean, the fellow who's associated with most is on a sunbed in Cyprus.
Tommy Robinson.
He hates Europe, but there he is enjoying the European sunshine and stirring up poison and hate in this country. Now, the problems are very real. The plain fact is that in the last 20, 30 years, unless you're a graduate, it's quite hard to get a decent income. So in Rotherham, I saw so many children of my constituents, who would be my constituents over 18 at the time, and still I think for the Rotherham MPs, without a decent job. If they have a job, it's long hours, low pay, no rights, no trade unions, and that's the current boss class in Britain. And they love anybody who comes in and is prepared to work all hours, day and night, 7 days a week. They give jobs to asylum seekers, car washing, anything. And unless we actually sort out our labour market, and I'm an old trade unionist, so you forgive me for saying that, this will only get worse. And it's the same across Europe. Last year, July last year, France had even, they enjoyed the Olympics, but July last year, there were 6-7 days of riots, 13,000 people arrested.
So this is not unique to us. I mean, talk about it going on in Ireland as well.
Indeed so. A very good point. There were huge equivalents in Dublin a few months ago, which got
Neil,
very little reporting in the English press.
Neil, you're agreeing on that point there?
Yeah, I am. But the only thing I would disagree with Dennis over is that I think we've got to actually deal with the asylum seeking problem. And I think that will, and I think it's very difficult to talk to the English Defence League. But on the other hand, they do represent people who have, genuine views. Now, they take it to extremes, but that I'm very much against. But on the other hand, I don't think we can ignore that it's happening. And I think that is probably the danger. And I think also I do actually think this is organised thuggery, because I don't think I'd be surprised. Haven't got the knowledge, but I suspect it's the same 300 or 400 people that are moving around the country. They can do that with social media very easily. They only need to send a very short message, and they can actually move people around. And so I think I think the social media side is a difficult one, because you don't want to shut down talk, but I think you should not be able to do it with anonymity, because people say things on social media that you wouldn't think of saying in a conversation, almost as though it hasn't come from them, and that's got to be dealt with by the government. But it's not an easy one.